Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Monica Pitek Fugetti. If you like what you've heard on my channel and you never want to miss any updated information, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. So today I want to talk a little bit more about trauma and its impact on the brain. Most of us know trauma as being something like a natural disaster or war or violence and something pretty tragic. But trauma is actually a lot more than that. It's really when we are experiencing something for too long, it becomes too much, and it really impacts our ability to focus, it impacts our ability to function and move past it. So whenever anything is disturbing and some sort of an attachment has been broken, trauma usually follows, because trauma in itself is really a broken attachment. So I want to talk about how this looks in the brain, because sometimes people, when they're experiencing high levels of anxiety, which are often caused by trauma, they tend to start to think they're going crazy, and then they blame themselves. So I want to talk about how it works in our brain, so maybe you can take that responsibility off of yourself. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we can do to help calm our bodies. So I'm going to use my fist as a visual aid for the brain. So this is your brain, and this is your what's called the prefrontal cortex. And in the prefrontal cortex, there is the left and the right brain. And the left brain houses all the logic, and it has the ability to do cause and effect, so it knows like if a behavior, what the consequence would be. And the right brain is where the creative side flows, where your emotion regulation is. And together, they give us higher order thinking that we as humans have and needed, really, to be able to live day to day. So underneath the prefrontal cortex is the amygdala here. So we can just imagine that this is that little spot where my brain is, where my nail is. So this is where trauma is held. Amygdala is the fear center of the brain. So when something traumatic happens, it gets sent to the amygdala. And the amygdala then sends it to another area of the brain. It's like, oh, we need to freak out. There's danger happening. Now, the amygdala plays a really important role, because what happens back in the day when we had lions and bears and all of that kind of thing, we had to know when we were in danger. And using our mind for logic didn't really help us get away from a threat. So what the amygdala does is it shuts down other areas of our brain, and it releases some stress hormones, cortisol, which help us go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. And the purpose is to alert us there is danger. We just have to take action right now. What happens when there's a trauma is, if it is not processed and stored into a long-term memory, and that's going to be right here. This is a hippocampus, so this is long-term memory. But if a trauma happens, an event happens that makes you feel really stuck, and you find yourself triggered a lot, you find yourself with higher levels of anxiety, and just in situations mentally and emotionally that you typically are not, what's probably happening is that event occurred, and now it's stuck in the amygdala here, and it's online. The amygdala is online, and then there's an area of our brain called the insula, and that is basically the part of our brain that tells us, hey, this is cold. Like, what you're feeling right now is cold. Go get a blanket. But that's offline when there's fear, and the amygdala is online. So like, you might be feeling cold, but you don't know what it is because the insula is offline. So the goal is to make the insula come online and make the amygdala go offline a little bit. So when you're stuck in trauma, it's like whatever happened yesterday. So if you were attacked by a dog at a young age, and now you're an adult, and you never reprocess that memory into a long-term memory, and because once it goes to a long-term memory, now everything else comes online here, and you're able to think more rationally and logically about things. So you would have been able to say, okay, that was a threat of a dog when I was a kid, but I don't have to be afraid of all dogs. But if that memory was never processed, your amygdala is like, oh no, you got to be afraid of all of the dogs. So small, big, large, medium, doesn't matter. All the dogs are going to trigger you to have fear. So what happens when the amygdala is really online too, it's not getting any signals up here to the left and the right brain and the cortex area, the prefrontal cortex area, which means you're not thinking logically, your emotion regulation is off, you're not able to really have that cost benefit and the consequences, you're not able to think in that higher order thinking. So fear happens, and you know how we say flip your lid? Basically, it flips your lid. So everything up here goes offline, and all you're doing is having that fight, flight, or freeze response. So when that happens, all the talk therapy and everything in the world, the cognitive behavioral therapy, challenging negative thoughts, is very useful. But what has to happen in trauma, because trauma-informed practices are a little bit different than other informed practices, because what we're doing with trauma is we have to have a somatic practice. So we're trying to calm the body. The mind and the body are very, very closely related. They're connected. And when we're in a state of fear, which is what trauma is, then our body is telling us that we are not safe. So what we need to do is start to relax the body, and we can do that through deep breathing exercises. We can do that through guided relaxation. We can do that through mindfulness training, and we can do that through a technique called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And this is a way for you to bring up those memories, those target memories that cause the trauma or the anxiety. And what you're doing is you're reprocessing them in present moment so that they go into the long-term memory, so that then you can look at those memories differently, and your triggers are lessened quite a bit. So that's a practice that I am trained in, and a lot of therapists out there are trained in, but it's a really, really, it is research-backed and evidence-based that EMDR really works to help you to reprocess those memories so that they don't harm you in the same way that maybe they have been harming you. So if you found this video useful, go ahead and leave a comment below and let me know what you think. Make sure to subscribe. And if you want to know more about me, or if you would like to make an appointment to talk to me, I have a practice in Southeast Michigan, Commerce, Michigan, but I do online as well, so I can service anybody across the state of Michigan. You can go ahead and do that at Whole Mind Wellness, PLLC.com. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you learned something.